Are you a family caregiver? Are you caregiving for someone who can no longer take care of themselves? Are you overwhelmed? This is CareGiver Solutions Info with Marcia Teele. Marcia will be hosting an hour of true stories and information, tips and updates of the latest research and necessary information in the caregiving field, focusing on you, the family caregiver. An Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert, Marcia has 15 years of hands-on experience at Arden Courts, a leader in assisted living dementia communities here in the U.S. Marcia covers everything you need to know as a family caregiver, especially if you care for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease or other related dementia or chronic illness. If you have a friend or relative that is also a family caregiver, call them now. They won't want to miss a minute. And let them know they can watch on caregiversolutions.info. And they can listen on WNN 1470 AM in South Florida or nationally on the iHeartRadio app. Now, sit back, relax, and learn from our host, Marcia Teele, as she brings information to you that may just be the caregiving solution you need.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Solutions Info. This show is for you, the family caregiver. If you're caring for someone that has memory loss, some type of dementia, maybe Alzheimer's disease, then this show is for you. It was created for you by people who understand what you're going through. Caregiving is a tough job. We know it's not always easy as a caregiver to get information, to go to support groups, to go to seminars, to take the time to read a book even, because you have no time. You're always doing, thinking, and it's a lot on your plate. So this show is perfect for somebody who wants to relax, sit back, watch, listen, either on the local radio in your car if you're traveling or in the comfort of your own home, on your internet, computer. We're here for you, and you can catch us live every week, and we also have archive shows on the website caregiversolutions.info. So I'm glad that you could join us today. I'm excited to be here. We have another great show for you. We are live from Boca Raton, Florida. We also have an opportunity for you to connect with us. We want to hear from you. If you have a question, if you have a comment or a suggestion, or if you have something that you'd like for us to discuss on Caregiver Solutions Info, all you have to do is send me an email, and we'll be glad to get that answered for you. The email address to reach me is delray@arden-courts.com. Again, that's Delray, DELRAY, at arden-courts.com. So last week we had a guest. We featured Life Care Funding last week's show. And Life Care Funding is an alternative option for financial resources to help pay for long-term care. And we know that's always a concern at some point, when you're looking down the road of how are we going to pay for long-term care. And Life Care Funding presented an option for caring for someone through proceeds of a life insurance policy that is purchased by Life Care Funding. So we talked all about that, and I received an email from Nancy in Ocala. And Nancy had something to say, and I'd like to read that to you. She said she wished she had known about this option when her family was in need of additional resources to pay for long-term care. She says, "Keep up the good work of providing caregivers important information that help us care better and easier in a job that is not easy." Thank you, Nancy, for that email. I'm glad that you found out about it, although it didn't help in your situation because you found out about it late, but I'm sure that you're going to be sharing that with others that it could help. So today we're going to be talking about various common feelings that caregivers go through along their journey of caregiving. From the moment maybe there's something going on or you have a diagnosis all the way through to the end. And it's a roller coaster sometimes. And caregivers really jump through hoops, and it's very emotional for them. And they go through all kinds of different emotions, sometimes one right after another. And they last sometimes minutes, sometimes hours, sometimes days, weeks. It's very, very difficult. And we have some experts that are going to be talking to to us about this emotional roller coaster and what we can do about it, and they're going to be sharing with us. And so when we come back, we're going to meet them. So we're taking our first quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about emotions with caregivers. So stay tuned.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. Make First Choice your first choice for home health care. First Choice is state certified for Medicare-covered services such as medical treatment and rehabilitation. Qualified healthcare professionals come to your home and work closely with your doctor to build a care plan designed to get you back on your feet as soon as possible. Founded and operated by registered nurses, First Choice Home Health is dedicated to providing exceptional home health care. Their highly skilled medical professionals have the knowledge and ability to provide patients quality care. Call First Choice Home Health at 561-296-2770. That's 561-296-2770. And tell them you want them as your first choice. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
And welcome back. We are with two professionals today that are passionate about helping caregivers and passionate about what they do to help caregivers. And I'm so glad to introduce to you today Naomi Shapiro and Marcia Gordon. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you for coming. Oh, it's wonderful. Two beautiful ladies, smiling faces. Nice to have you today. Now, I want to let everybody know Naomi is a social worker. She has her master's in social work, and she is the program director of the Caregiver Resources and Respite Program with the Ruth and Norman Rales Jewish Family Services. And Marcia is an alternative administrator of Jewish Family Services, a new division they have called At Home. She also runs the Senior Companion Program at Jewish Family Services, and she has her master's in public administration, specifically in healthcare. So you guys definitely are qualified to talk about this, and that's why you're here, because we want to share your expertise and your knowledge with caregivers so they can, identify that they're not the only ones going through their trials and tribulations of caregiving. And one of the things that's very, very difficult for caregivers to understand is the emotions that come with this. It's a roller coaster. And I know Naomi being a master's in social work, that's right up your alley with those emotions. And I know that Marcia, with what you do, you work with a lot of families out of the area because you're helping them with actually caregiving resources in the home. So I think this is a wonderful match that we can talk about all of these things. So before we get started, Naomi, explain what you do as the caregiver resource manager or director, and what is the respite program, in case there are people listening that don't really understand what respite means.
So we provide a multi-level service for caregivers and their loved ones with memory loss. We have support groups and educational workshops for the family caregiver, and we also provide respite day activities for the loved one with memory loss, meaning that for a few hours during the day, the loved one with memory loss can stay with us and engage in activities that range from current events to art to music. And we keep it fun, we keep it stimulating, and this allows a family caregiver time to have their own leisure time, get things done that they don't usually get to accomplish when they're caring for their loved one. Or they can also choose to attend the support groups and the educational workshops, which have become a tremendous resource for the ones that do choose to participate in those.
Great. So respite for them is just taking time for themselves and not worrying about their loved one, keeping them safe and engaged, and giving them that special time that both of them really need, because, caregiving is so stressful. Sometimes they need a break from each other, the caregiver and the person they're caring for, because, as you know, too much togetherness sometimes can create some conflicts, and I think that's a valuable service. So if you're a caregiver and you haven't heard that word before, respite, a lot of people have not familiar with that, and respite is just means taking time for yourself, taking time to do what you need to do, take a breath, take a break, and not worry about your loved one while you're taking a break, because you're going to put them in the hands of a professional, qualified caregiver, whether it's in a daycare center, whether it's in assisted living, whatever the setting might be. So it's important to know about that. Thank you for sharing what you do.
And I just want to say that an important part of that, and what I try to work with my caregivers on, is to learn to feel what they feel with regard to leaving their loved one. Feel the guilt, but do it anyway.
There you go.
Because everybody wins when that is accomplished. So it's not, the goal isn't to not have the emotions, the goal isn't to not have the guilt or to not have the worry, but the goal is to learn to do things anyway in a lot of the cases.
Right. And we're going to talk a lot about guilt, because that's a biggie. But before there's guilt, let's talk about the big D, okay? And that would be denial. I think that, when dementia comes into play, it's a surprise for most people. They don't expect it. You get a diagnosis, and sometimes even before the diagnosis, you start seeing signs and things are happening. You start worrying and you start covering up, and that's he's just getting old, or he's just a little bit forgetful, and there's nothing wrong with him. And you start going through denial. And I know, Marcia, you have a lot of experience with denial, especially with adult children that live not in the same town as their parents. Can you tell me about that?
Yes. Well, for 3 years as the coordinator of a program that matched caregivers from our local community to take care of local seniors, many of whom were experiencing memory loss, I dealt on a daily basis with the families who were calling for these services. And they really had a lot of questions and were unsure and were definitely in denial about what they were hearing on the other end of the line when they spoke to mom or dad. So we try to help them through it. It's always important for us to first make sure that they had professional medical evaluations done. And we have to be so sensitive to the families and not just burden them immediately with all the possibilities of what their parents are experiencing. Little by little, we have to make them understand that there could be more going on. And of course, if it's possible for them to come visit and see for themselves, because so much can be covered up long distance by phone.
So is there a typical inquiry? Someone calls from New York and get you on the phone and they have an issue or a question. Is there a typical, something you hear all the time?
Yes.
What would that be like?
The typical phone call is mom or dad recently passed away and the surviving parent is alone now, isn't able to drive. When I speak to them on the phone, I'm noticing that they're forgetful. I'm not sure if it's just the stress or if they're confused. She says she ate, and I'm not sure if she did. Her neighbors that used to be her friends that she could rely upon are experiencing their own health conditions and aren't available anymore. And we really need an adult who's competent to go on a regular basis and be our eyes and ears to help us find out what's going on.
Okay, so that would be a typical scenario. And from there, you start asking more questions.
Yes.
Find out more about the parent.
A lot of times we find out that the children, unfortunately, are not fully aware about whether it's safe for that parent to even be at home alone anymore. And if they are still driving, they do express to us concern. My parent is 95. he's still driving. I know he shouldn't be, but he is. And right then and there, that's a very typical phone call where we have to handle it with so much care and understanding. And yet, as the professionals that we are, we're so concerned.
So that's a good example. So if a son says, yeah, I know, Dad's 95, he's still driving, probably shouldn't be. Okay, so what do you do with that?
I ask some questions. I say, well, why do you think he shouldn't be driving? We find out if it's physical reasons where maybe their reactivity is not as quick as it used to be, vision, hearing, mobility issues. And then usually we'll also hear about the time that they got lost, the time that they couldn't figure out where mom or dad was for a few hours, where they made the wrong turn to the hairdresser and were gone for hours. And, we take it from there. Basically, we tell them about the services that we can provide, send a professional in to do an assessment, assess their needs, and reassure them that once they're involved with us, they'll be in safe hands with good recommendations for what's necessary.
Great. So have you ever had a circumstance where you did go into the home and you really assessed that it was much worse than you were told, or even that the adult child imagined, and you were really surprised and you had to go back to the adult child to tell them? Did anybody ever sort of say, no, that can't be true?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yes. Unfortunately, sometimes you can tell that the child is aware of the problem and they want what's best for their parent. Everybody wants safety and, companionship and comfort for their parent. But there are longstanding relationships that have existed since the birth of that child with that parent. And they've evolved over time as the child has grown to be an adult. But many of those dynamics, they just stay. And there could be a controlling parent. And even though the adult child is now in their 50s or even 60s, that relationship is the same. And the child is not comfortable being the one to take the car away or take their independence away. And they feel paralyzed and unable to make that decision, or let it be let it be that they're blamed for it by the parent. The angry phone calls and the parent that's saying, leave me alone, I'm the parent, stop treating me like I'm a child. They can't do what Naomi said, which is have the feelings but do it anyway.
Right.
They struggle a lot.
Right, they do, because like you said, there's always family dynamics, and you have the adult child who's really now more in the position of what the parent should be, telling the parent more, the roles are reversed, in other words. And it's very difficult to put yourself in that role reversal, especially when you're experiencing those family dynamics of growing up. And I know a lot of adults that, are getting older and perhaps having these cognitive issues. They're intimidating sometimes to their adult children. And the children are so intimidated, like you said, they don't want to be the bad guy. They don't want to have to make that decision. They don't want to have that responsibility because mom or dad will hate me. Right. They'll be mad at me. Oh my gosh, I can't do that. And like you said, then it becomes paralyzed, and then somebody has to step up to the plate. Right. And in that case, would that be somebody be you all to go in and take care of the situation, or would it be that through your talking and counseling with the family, you kind of get them to understand what they need to do?
Our goal is to always have a safe situation, so we impress it upon the family with as much compassion as possible, and we usually have excellent results.
Okay, that's good.
It's not always easy.
Right.
And it can be complicated, and it's very emotionally charged on the other end for the family members, especially when there are multiple siblings and they have to agree. Or,
they don't always agree?
Or one sibling, as you know, that takes the brunt of the responsibility and then has the emotions of feeling upset and angry and frustrated that another sibling can't take on the role. And, it's
very
family
important.
dynamic.
Right, it's family. Very important what you just said, because we're talking about feelings that caregivers feel. So if you're the primary caregiver and you're an adult daughter and you're down in Florida and you're taking care of your parent who has dementia, and you have 2 or 3 brothers that are out of the area, out of state, but you're the one, they don't know what you're going through. And now you're trying to explain to them, and you've got family dynamics with your siblings. So not only is the family primary caregiver, in this case the daughter, going through emotions, all of a sudden now her secondary, the second line, or the second string, like in football, the second string, they're going through emotions too, because now the daughter is kind of dumping on them, they feel, and she's not getting support from them, so they're getting probably angry, right? Frustrated. So it really feeds on itself, and it affects more than just that primary caregiver.
It's a typical scenario.
Typical. So you see that a lot. Okay.
Sometimes we're lucky and there's some really nice solutions and people come together, but it's not really the rule. The rule is it's emotionally charged. It happens unexpectedly, and the emotions go.
Yeah. It's a lot of stuff going on, and you have to weed through it. And sometimes you need professional help. Sometimes you need a social worker. Sometimes you need a therapist.
Yes, for the caregivers, whether they're primary and with the parent or out of town, in any case, when decisions need to be made, if you're the one who needs to make those decisions, I highly recommend a support group, professional help, talking to a friend who maybe has been through the same thing that you think got good results, because it's hard to do it alone.
Right. And you said something interesting, too, that I want to share with everybody. You mentioned the word cover up, and I think that's real important to talk about that, because it has to do a lot with denial, and we're talking about the emotion denial right now. Covering up, that is something that not only caregivers do, cover up for the lack of wherewithal, the cognitive impairment sometimes with a spouse, but it's also something that a person with dementia does to cover up the fact that they can't remember something, that there's nothing wrong with them. So covering up is so I guess prevalent when you're dealing with out-of-town family members.
And early stages.
Because you mentioned the son said, I'm not sure if mom is eating, even though she said she did. And I think that's real important, because when someone is going through the early stages of dementia, and they have even mild cognitive impairment, which is the precursor to a dementia, they're very sly and tricky, and sometimes even manipulative with telling family what they want family to know, not necessarily what the truth was. Sometimes they don't even know what the truth is because they forget because of the memory loss. So in this case with the son saying, I'm not sure mom ate, a typical scenario, we can do a little role play here. So you be the son and I'll be the mom, and you're checking on me. So you're the son. So you're calling me on the phone. What would you say?
Hi, Mom.
Hi, dear.
Hi, Mom. It's nice to hear your voice. I just had a lunch break, and I thought I'd give you a call and just see how your morning went. Did you take your pills?
Oh, of course I did. You know I always take my medicine.
Oh, okay.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. So, have you been filling your pill boxes?
Yes, that's, those, the pink and the green and the yellow. I love those pretty colors. And so what did you do today at work?
Oh, the usual. I had a lot of clients to meet with and stuff, but I only have a few minutes left, and I just want to make sure that you had breakfast before you took your pills, because you can't take them on an empty stomach. You remember?
Well, dear, from the time you were a little boy, I always had my English muffin and my tea, so of course I had that today.
Okay, Mom.
So you don't need to worry about me.
Okay, Mom. Okay, don't forget, did you check your calendar for your next doctor appointment?
Oh, you know what? My neighbor, she's got it all figured out. She's going to handle it because she's going to take me, so I don't need to worry about that.
Can you I have to go in a minute. I really miss you, but can you give me her number and name again? Because I want to call her.
No,
and just
you know what? I don't have it right here, so call me back, later, and maybe, when you have more time and I have more time, and we'll talk about. Okay, dear. Thank you for calling. I'm so glad. You have a good day at work. Okay, bye. Okay, is that typical? That could be a very typical.
That's a big cover up.
That's a cover up.
That's a big
And now,
cover-up.
what did she cover up? Right?
She doesn't necessarily even remember which pills to take when.
Right.
She just relying on what she always ate, because she doesn't remember whether she ate or not.
Right.
So it's
for
much
years, for
easier
30
to
years,
say that's what she always
right.
ate.
She remembered in her long-term memory that she
ate
always
an
ate
English muffin
and tea. So she's going to repeat that because that's what she knows from her long-term memory. And as we know, long-term memory is the last to go. Short-term memory is the first to go. So whether she really did or not, it sounded good. And the son probably believed her because he knew that's what she always did. And, oh, yeah, she knows, but it doesn't mean she really did.
It's impossible to know, and it's not to place the guilt. Families have developed, long from living out of town. It was a great idea 35 years ago. Mom and Dad retired here. They had a place to come in the sun when it was cold. It was wonderful, and no one really, really thought about what was going to happen 35 years down the road. And their parents don't want to move back up north.
Right, and the kids have their jobs and their families.
They can't live down here as much. So
the point is, with covering up, you can't always believe what your elderly parent tells you on the phone, because they can be covering up. They can tell you what you want to hear. They can tell you what they think you want to hear. And in this little role play that we did, the mom really deflected off of herself. She didn't want the questions from the son. She didn't want to be questioned about what she was doing, what she was eating, and what responsibility she had. She tried to push it back on the son and how his work and those kinds of things. And so you'll see that a lot of this deflecting the questions, because they are uncomfortable with answering those questions.
And there are a few reasons. I mean, the person who's experiencing the memory loss can be afraid of losing independence and don't want to burden their children.
There you go. Perfect.
So it's both those things, one or the other, or both.
Perfect. Exactly right. Wow. So that's denial. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about lots and lots of other emotions that are very common in caregivers. So you don't want to miss this. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Do you need the advice of an elder law attorney, but perhaps find it difficult or overwhelming getting to appointments? The solution is the Elder Law Department. They bring elder law to you by meeting with you in the comfort of your own surroundings to discuss your personal situation and family needs. In practice since 1994, Heidi Friedman is a member of the Elder Law section of the Florida Bar. She and her team help families with issues that include incapacity and estate planning, asset preservation, veterans benefits, and other legal issues that seniors may face. Call the Elder Law Department at 954-383-1143. 954-383-1143. They bring elder law to you. Make First Choice your first choice for home health care. First Choice is state certified for Medicare covered services such as medical treatment and rehabilitation. Qualified healthcare professionals come to your home and work closely with your doctor to build a care plan designed to get you back on your feet as soon as possible. Founded and operated by registered nurses, First Choice Home Health is dedicated to providing exceptional home health care. Their highly skilled medical professionals have the knowledge and ability to provide patients quality care. Call First Choice Home Health at 561-296-2770. That's 561-296-2770. And tell them you want them as your first choice. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
Hi, I'd like to thank our national sponsor, Arden Courts Memory Care, for helping to make this program available to you, as well as our local sponsors. Arden Courts is a leader in memory care all across the country. They have over 50 locations, and Arden Courts cares about the resident and taking care of them and does a fabulous job, but they care about the caregiver too, about you and what you're going through. And they want to help you with all kinds of different issues like we're talking about here, and educate you, because the better that a caregiver is educated in the knowledge of caregiving and all the struggles and all of the possibilities that could happen, then you're going to be prepared. And being prepared is going to make it a little less stressful for you. One of the ways that Arden Courts would like to help prepare you for your journey along the Alzheimer's and dementia path is by providing a free resource. This is called the 36-Hour Day. It is a book that is considered the best of the best when we're talking about caregiving. It's a family guide, and so it will be valuable to you to learn about Alzheimer's, different kinds of dementia, the different tips and different techniques that you can use to help you day by day. If you would like to have this book for free, all you have to do is call Arden Courts on their toll-free number and tell them you heard about this offer on the Caregiver Solutions Info program. That number is 888-478-2410. Again, 888-478-2410. And I hope you give them a call. Tell them that you would like to have this book. They'll make sure they can get it out to you right away. And while you're on the phone with them, ask them about the respite programs that they offer that we talked about before break, and what that means and how they can help you with take time for you and short-term respite stays. And you'll have a resource right there at your fingertips. So we're back here with Naomi Shapiro and Marissa Gordon, and they both work at Jewish Family Services in different capacities. And they're talking about helping families deal with the roller coaster of emotions from anywhere from denial to anger to guilt to frustration. And we're talking about that because caregivers go through these roller coaster emotions and sometimes don't understand them. Sometimes they are surprised by these emotions, and we want to talk about them so that we can help not only understand them, but what we can do with them. So we're back, and Naomi, I want to talk to you about after denial, a lot of people get angry, all right? So maybe they finally, not in denial anymore, but now they're angry. They're angry that their spouse has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and they just can't get over that, and it just feeds on them. Do you ever experience that in your daily workings with caregivers?
Yes, many times. And similar to denial, similar to all the emotional stages within the caregiving paradigm, anger is multifaceted, and there's different types, and it comes out in different ways. I think the primary way that it comes out, especially at the onset of that emotional stage, is angry at the fact that they have to suffer through this, that their friend next door, that their cousin in New York, that their sister-in-law in Baltimore doesn't have to deal with a husband with memory loss, or a wife or an adult or a parent with cognitive decline, and what did they do in their life to do this, to have to suffer through this, or what did their spouse or loved one do
so
to
it's
have to suffer
basically
through
it's
this?
not fair.
It's not
it's
fair.
not fair. Why did this
It's not
happen to me? Because although their loved one is the one that has the diagnosis and has the memory loss, basically the caregiver who's caring for them is, it's not fair. Why do I have to do this? And they're angry about that. So how do you talk to someone who's at that stage? How do you help them? What kind of insight can you give somebody? How do you even begin to help them understand?
Well, we always encourage our caregivers to acknowledge and recognize, to get, as you're touching upon, to get to the stage where you're ready to acknowledge the anger. There's a lot of work there also. And once they are ready to acknowledge it, it's a lot of just listening and accepting and listening to what they have to say with regard to how unfair it is, with regard to how they feel that they have it harder. There's also a lot of benefit in helping each individual realize that everyone struggles and is lucky in different ways. So there's a continuum for each person, for every caregiver, for every individual, and some have it easier in some ways, some are challenged more in other ways, and that is a recurring theme as well. There's a lot of anger towards the loved one also, which is a scarier road to travel.
Yes.
But
talk about that too, because they're angry because they have to take on this burden now. That's one reason they're angry. But then they take it out. They take that anger out. They project it onto their loved one many times. So talk about that.
Well, when a caregiver first interfaces with us at the Weissman Center, where the caregiver program is run, there's a lot of armor built up. And they're very guarded against feelings. They're very guarded against what they share. And to just sit with someone and first acknowledge how much credit they deserve and what kind of work they do, and how you recognize how terrifying the journey can be at times, is sometimes something they haven't heard. And that sort of helps the armor shed. In terms of the anger specifically towards the loved one, you need to be approached gingerly. And in support groups, I find is often the best way to touch upon those feelings, because they're sitting with other spouses, they're sitting with other adult children who also experience that, and it becomes less scary. It becomes less of a guilty emotion when you're able to hear other people also discuss how angry they are at their loved one, which there's a lot of shame involved in that also. And the support group is a way to dissipate that type of feeling and really experience together similar feelings.
Right, because they're angry, but at the same time there's another emotion that is dancing around all of that, and that's a lot of frustration, because here they're trying to relate to their loved one, especially in a spousal situation. They're trying to relate to their loved one the way they always have for the last 40, 50 years, and all of a sudden that person is different, and they're frustrated. It's like, why don't you understand what I'm saying? I told you. No, that's not what we do. And it goes on and on and on, because it builds up a lot of frustration, which then leads to anger.
And even for our caregivers that can accept on an intellectual level that their loved one has cognitive decline, to be able to accept that they're not emotionally able to give to them what they did causes so much anger. And I have one client in particular who just this past week said to me that she benefited so much from coming to our caregiver services just by being able to accept the fact that her husband is not able to say, I'm sorry you have a headache. I'm sorry you're so tired and you have to cook dinner anyway. That one acceptance was not attainable for her until she was able to start expressing it and meeting other caregivers who do the same thing.
Right. You have to have a breakthrough, because they don't get it. The caregiver, they're trying to relate to them in the same old way, and they just don't get it that person can't do what you want them to do. They can't remember. They can't identify. They can't relate. They just can't, and they're not doing it on purpose. They're not trying to frustrate you on purpose. And I think, that's just really hard. And I know that, it is a breakthrough, and they do need to talk about it, and they have the support not only of, the professionals, but the other caregivers to say, hey, that happens to me too. You're not the only one that happens to. And once they accept that, like you said, they have to come to that point where, okay, I understand this is not ever going to be the same. I understand. I don't like it. I don't even want to accept it, but I understand it's never going to be the same. And then that'll even lead us down the road to another emotion, which is the sadness that we get to. But before we get to that, we're talking about the anger. And I just want to say, if you're in a situation where you're fighting with your spouse, and your spouse has some form of dementia, that's a red flag that you need to do something about that right away, because what's going to happen is that it can go both ways. And if you're lashing out verbally or physically or even emotionally to your spouse who has dementia, because you're so angry and you're so frustrated, they're going to lash back a lot of times, because people with dementia will mirror what they see and mirror what they hear. And so if you're lashing out, you don't want to be doing that to somebody who, is physically fit and able to punch you back. And I have seen too many bruises on caregivers, on wives who have been punched by their husband, not because they mean to, not because they wanted to. They couldn't help it. It was their brain wasn't functioning right. They didn't have the filter to stop where maybe you had a bad relationship. Maybe they always had, fighting. But in the past, without the dementia, people can stop because they have a filter, and their brain can tell them, all right, I don't need to do this. I can do other things. I can walk away. But the filter goes when you're dealing with dementia, and they can't help it, and they just, boom, and you're on the floor. Have you ever dealt, either one of you, with caregivers that have been in a physical situation where they got abused?
I've had wives that have been not badly, but that have been shoved or pushed, or that the husband had lifted a hand but not quite struck them. And it's interesting because a lot of the times the wives get fearful in the moment, but once the moment passes, they feel that there's no need to address it specifically because that wasn't really him, and he doesn't really act that way, and he never did. And for
So they're covering up
42
for him.
years,
Oh, there's
he
that
was
word
so
again.
gentle, and he was so loving, and he would never do anything like that.
Yes.
And that also plays into helping them with the denial, helping them get through acknowledging that they're angry. And once they're able to get through the denial, acknowledge that they're angry, they're a little more capable of addressing these types of incidents.
Yeah, but I just heard that cover up. They didn't mean it. It's okay. It just happened one time, and they're just making excuses for them. But it's a red flag, and I think that caregivers need to pay attention to those red flags because it is something that is unpredictable. Alzheimer's disease, the behaviors that go with Alzheimer's disease is unpredictable. You might think that you know your wife. You might think that you know your husband. But Alzheimer's disease changes everything, all right? You cannot predict. It's unpredictable. People that have a certain personality, I mean, this is, for example, people that have a certain personality and they get Alzheimer's disease. In my experience over the last 15 years talking with so many thousands of caregivers is that with the disease, the person's personality is either going to continue on that same path and be more like that person always was, just more. So if they were sweet, they're going to be sweeter. If they were mean, they're going to be meaner. All right? That's one option. The other one is the flip side. And the flip side to that is if they were sweet, woof, they can be mean. If they were mean, they could be sweet. I actually had an adult child tell me one time that she really didn't mind that her mother got Alzheimer's disease because her mother was like a drill sergeant and used to beat the kids and was angry and mean and was a terrible person, just full of anger herself, and she took it out on her kids. And when she got Alzheimer's disease, she became a really sweet little old lady, and everyone loved her. So it can go both ways. And so, again, just be aware of that situation. And anytime there's any kind of physical, you don't know what can happen, and you want to leave. You want to leave.
I always say there's no U-turns. There's no U-turns in this disease,
right?
And that's just something that we repeat, or that I repeat again and again, because if it happened once, it's very likely it'll happen again,
right?
And just drilling that into caregivers in as soft and as a loving way as possible is very helpful for them. And to remind them that like I said, there are no U-turns. And once things have reared its head, once behaviors have reared their heads, the likelihood of it happening again is pretty high.
Yes, absolutely. I like that. No U-turns. All right.
In this disease, there's no U-turns.
No U-turns. It is scary, and caregivers need to be aware of that feeling, because if you're scared, if you're fearful, if you're fear that you're going to get hurt, and you're in that situation where they're coming after you, you need to get help, and you need to get some resources. I mean, even if it's walking away from the argument, walking outside, getting a neighbor, getting someone to help you. I mean, in some cases, you even have to call 911. And when that leads to another whole issue of guilt, okay? And when we come back from our last commercial break, we're going to be talking about caregivers and guilt, because that's a biggie. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back with Marcia and Naomi, and we're going to be talking about more emotions that caregivers face. So we'll be right back.
Arden Courts is not just a place to live, it's a place to call home. Residential living combined with quality caregiving. This is the philosophy behind Arden Courts. Communities created exclusively for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia who would benefit from a safe and structured environment. For additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides, call 888-478-2410 to locate a community nearest you. Inquire about our educational seminars, resource library, or support groups, or simply feel free to ask questions you may have about Alzheimer's and related dementias. At Arden Courts, we know, we understand, and we can help, because memory care is all we do. Remember, call 888-478-2410 for additional information about any of the unique services Arden Courts provides. Do you need the advice of an elder law attorney but perhaps find it difficult or overwhelming getting to appointments? The solution is the Elder Law Department. They bring elder law to you by meeting with you in the comfort of your own surroundings to discuss your personal situation and family needs. In practice since 1994, Heidi Friedman is a member of the Elder Law section of the Florida Bar. She and her team help families with issues that include incapacity and estate planning, asset preservation, veterans benefits, and other legal issues that seniors may face. Call the Elder Law Department at 954-383-1143. 954-383-1143. They bring elder law to you. You are listening to your host, Marcia Teele, an Alzheimer's disease and dementia care expert on CareGiverSolutions.info. If you have a question or wish to share a story, call into the show at 888-565-1470 and talk with Marcia. Now, back to Caregiver Solutions.
And we're back. We've been talking about common emotions that caregivers go through when they're dealing with memory loss and Alzheimer's, other related dementia. Taking care of someone is very difficult, and there are a lot of emotions. So we're talking about denial, we're talking about guilt, we're talking about sadness, we're talking about anger. Next, we're going to talk about guilt, and that's a big one. And Naomi, you mentioned a few minutes ago when we talked about the respite program, people feel guilty by letting go a little bit and letting someone else help them. Why do you think that is?
I think that caregivers have the need to do everything on their own, similar to when they had their children when they were younger. They needed to do everything on their own as a parent. Getting someone else to take care of their child or to help them in any kind of way was never quite as good as what they could do themselves. And it really translates to later in life when they're caring for their spouse or when the adult child is caring for the parent. There's a need to do everything on their own so that they know how it's done. They know it's done the right way, the way mom loves, the way dad loves, the way their wife, the husband loves. And it's very hard to break through that dynamic. So we encourage, of course, them to talk about that and to acknowledge what it is exactly that they're fearful of or that they're guilty of, and to think if there might be a possibility of once a week or a few hours one day or 2 hours one day, allowing someone else to help take care of their parent, of their loved one.
Yeah.
And just to imagine that in their head first. Do they think that that's an attainable goal once a week? We'll set up a finite amount of time that they are comfortable with at the beginning.
Right. Yeah, you're right. They sometimes caregivers can actually be martyrs, and they're going to do or die no matter come hell or high water. They're going to do this because they're the spouse and nobody does it as well as I do, and it's hard for them to let go.
And the dirty little word judgment, which comes into play also, where especially if they're in a community where their peers are living and there's a clubhouse and their peers take care of the husband or the wife in one way and they're the one to, let's say the word is dump their husband or dump their wife in a respite for a few hours, then they're judged by their peers as not being a good enough spouse, not being a good enough child, and that creates a lot of tension within the caregiver. And of course, the ideal is to do what you know is best for yourself and for your loved ones anyway, but that's sometimes a very difficult point to get to.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's competition between caregivers. Is I take care of my loved one better than you take care of your loved one because look what I did, and they want to feel a lot of pride in doing that, but at the same time, it's not always the best thing because, you know, I've seen too many caregivers land in the hospital because of that and not letting go and let someone. And you're right. Maybe a caregiver, a respite program, an assisted living, wherever the person is going, maybe they won't do exactly what that spouse did at the same time, in the same way, you know, but it will get done. And it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Life isn't perfect. Things aren't perfect. And so that's good that you talk about that guilt. You have something to say about that too, Marissa.
Yeah, what's interesting in the cases that I deal with is take, for instance, a mom who's experiencing early stages of dementia. And if her daughter or son happened to live close by, she would love for them to be the one helping her. But they can't because they're not here. And yet she absolutely refuses to have professional help or a caregiver hired by an agency come and provide that help. So it's a real conundrum.
You're talking about the mom refuses.
The mom refuses, right. So you have children who feel guilty because they can't be the caregivers because their life doesn't allow it. And a mom who's refusing to get the help that the child wants because she still has a say in the matter can't really force someone into accepting care. And there's a lot of guilt because people know that if only they could be here, mom would be safer.
Right. And that happens quite a lot, too, that an adult child will arrange for care into the home to take care of mom or dad, and the caregiver will show up and mom or dad will come to the door like, oh, no, I don't need you, honey. You can go home.
It does
I'm
happen.
fine.
It happens all the
time.
time.
And it happens, like you said, all the time. And that person cannot force themselves to go into that home because it is that resident's home, and they have the right to turn that person away.
That's right. And it's a long, tedious, drawn-out process to establish, guardianship and even other legal things that haven't been taken care of ahead of time. So, of course, we encourage everyone to seek out things like durable power of attorneys and things like that because it's very important to do ahead of time before the loved one is documented as being memory impaired.
Right. I know this one particular daughter who came to see me, and her mom was like that. She didn't want anybody in the house. And for some reason, somehow someone got into the house, but the mom kicked them out.
Right.
And, they have to leave. It's their house. I don't want you here, and you have to leave. So the mom would kind of hoard up in the house and wouldn't let anybody in. And the daughter wanted me to meet her mom. So, I went under the pretense that I was the daughter's friend,
Very frequent.
Right. So trying to fool her a little bit so I could see what the situation was and help her out and assess it. And what we ended up doing is, see, a lot of people with that mild cognitive impairment, or they need some help, they need some supervision, but they're on the fence. They're maybe they feel that they don't need a babysitter, and the adult children are afraid because they know mom might leave on the stove or might walk out of the house or lock herself out, in which case, like this one lady did. But they don't want that babysitter because sometimes the person with the dementia, they're in denial themselves that I don't need anything. And that's when it gets really scary because they're there, and trying to break through that is very, very difficult. And it's a common problem. And I know that you deal with it all the time.
There are many factors that come into play. We have such a range of clients that we meet. There are clients that have thrown in the towel on their own lives. They don't want to spend the money on their own care, and they don't think it's important. They don't mind sitting at that kitchen table and staring at the walls as long as on the other line they know that their children and grandchildren are thriving. They don't consider themselves important anymore.
That's sad.
It is sad.
Yeah. And I knew a lady who didn't want to spend the money on the medications either. She was saving the money.
Right.
They want to spend it. And so, there are a lot of factors that go into helping people that are living home alone, and either their spouses have passed or their adult children aren't around. So if this talks to you, if this speaks to you, this information that we're talking about, take note because, maybe your parent is in denial, or maybe your family is in denial of a situation where you're not there all the time to assess. And there is help out there. There's resources for you to be able to get to help you to help them. And that being said, I want to at least give you all an opportunity to let everybody know if they wanted to tap into the resources where you all can help them either with a caregiver at home or through support services that you have. How can they contact you?
So again, my name is Naomi Shapiro, and my phone number is 561-558-2542. I can also be reached on my email, which is Naomi, S as in Sam, at railsjfs.org. And through those two different contact venues, you can get information on the Caregiver Resources and Respite Program that runs in Delray weekly at the Weissman Center.
Okay. And what about for you, Marissa, with your new program,
Right.
JFS at Home?
JFS at Home is a newly licensed home health agency. We provide hands-on care for clients who need it through home health aides, certified nursing assistants. We also have senior companions for clients that need companionship, driving, assistance at home. And you can reach us at 561-852-3116, or you can email me at Marissa, MARISSAG, at jfshome.org.
Great. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't say that Arden Courts also provides support group meetings for caregivers, and they also offer a respite program. We have a program called Take Time for Tuesdays, where you can actually bring your loved one in, have a full day of programming for them, and you could spend your time taking care of yourself. They also do short-term stays as well as longer-term stays. And Arden Courts is located all across the United States. Hopefully there's one near you. And if you want to locate an Arden Courts to find out more about their programs, about the respite, about the support groups that are available, about caregiver seminars, and about the 36-hour day book, you can call toll-free 888-478-2410 and find out about all the services that Arden Courts can provide. So in our last couple minutes we have here, give me your thoughts on de-stressing caregivers. Just throw out what they can do.
I think that a major way for caregivers to minimize their stress is to get actual information that will help them. When become armored with information that they need about attorneys, about care, about any type of services and resources in the community, their stress levels do go down.
That's right. So you heard it from the best. Take care of yourself, learn information, keep watching the program. We have a great show every week for you. We will be back, same place, same time next week. And in the meantime, don't forget, give someone a hug because they need it and so do you. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver Solutions with Marcia Teele. Join us next week as Marcia, who has 15 years of Alzheimer's disease and dementia care experience, brings you more needed information to help with the care of your loved one. This show can be seen again on caregiversolutions.info, and questions can be left on the site, which may be used on the program to help others. See you next week for more Caregiver Solutions.